Hey everybody, here we are back at the 300ZX project. This video I'm going to start to put the intake collector back together there, hook everything back up, valve covers back on, all that good stuff. If you're looking at how to take that apart, check out part 1 of this video where I disassemble everything, a multitude of hoses and everything, get it all apart. And part 2 where you are now, we're going to put her back together. All right, so as a bit of a recap, this is an 86 300ZX turbo 5-speed car. So that's a Z31 platform, and it's the VG30 ET motor that's in it that we're working on here. Here's all the parts that came off. They've all been cleaned up, they've been painted, they've been polished, they've been treated. So we're going to start putting them back together now. Hopefully I've made enough notes and labeled enough parts that I can remember where the absolute spaghetti of vacuum lines and hoses go, get them all back together with nothing leaking. I mean, that would be the ultimate goal there. So I have the valve covers with the new gaskets back on already. I didn't actually video it, but I've got this old valve cover that came off the car here. I'll just show you quickly. Once you peel out the old gasket, and this one, which I'm pretty sure was pretty close to original, was pretty tough to get out. But anyway, you end up with this groove. The groove's got a whole series of these retaining tabs in here, and all you've really got to do, you get a molded gasket here. So put it in place, flat side down. So the flat side sits in here. Of course, the raised or curved side is what's going to seal. And then really it's a matter of placing it and then just making sure where the tabs are that it seats properly, because that's what's going to retain the gasket. So it's just go around, put it in place, make sure it seats well around each one of these retaining tabs, and you're good to go. You should also get, with your gasket kit, you should get 9 little rubber, I don't know, I guess you'd call them washer bolt seals. So you should have this little retaining cup that sits on top of the valve cover, and then here, I'll just move this so I can see the light. There we are. So I'm doing this one-handed. So it's just a matter of replacing those, sliding that on with the bolt, and then you put it on there, and then screw those down. Now I think I'm actually ready to put the intake back on. Now, if all you've done is taken the intake off to change your valve cover gaskets, the only thing you're going to have to really worry about is making sure that this gasket surface here is cleaned off before you put it back together. I took a bunch of stuff off of here. It's all been cleaned and painted and so on, as you can see. So I've had that off, put it all back together now. The other thing I did, if you recall from part 1, when I took it apart, I could not get the EGR valve disconnected from the car, from the exhaust manifold. So I removed this with the 2 studs still in place, and I managed to slide it out and work it out. My concern is putting it back in, trying to maneuver it around to get those studs back into the EGR, through the EGR valve, and I'm going to just struggle to keep the gasket in any kind of position. So I have taken these 2 studs out. I've taken them out. I've run a tap through here so the threads are nice. I've run a die down the, here's one of the studs. I've run a die down here so this thread's nice. So it goes in really nice. There's no struggle there. And what I'm hoping is I can place this in the car, loosely bolt it with a couple of the bolts here so I still have a little bit of shake, and then slide this through the EGR valve into here and get it bolted up. That's my hope. We're going to see how that goes. I guess you'll see it as well as I do. So we're going to try and do that. Other than that, I do believe this is pretty much ready to start hooking up now. So I think I'm all ready under here to put the manifold back on. For the work I've done, I've plugged the injectors back in 6 places. I have put the leads on this side here because they're easy to get at right now. I've changed the plugs because, again, they're never any easier to get at than they are now, even though these I don't believe were that old. They got brand new NGK plugs in. I'll put the number in the description. And we've got the new gasket for the manifold collector there. I've got it just placed there. I'm not sure how well this is going to stay. I may end up having to use some of the gasket maker or RTV stuff underneath. I want to make sure I get an airtight seal, of course. So I'm going to try this first to see if I can get it placed. If not, yeah, we'll go to plan B. All right, I've dropped a couple of Allen keys just into a couple of the screw holes here. I hope that'll help me locate this onto the manifold properly. Already, which is a bit problematic. This side seems to be pretty decently in place, to be fair. I have the manifold now basically in place. Technically 5 bolts are all started, but they're loose right now. You can see they're kind of loose. And I left them a little loose so I could move things just a touch to try and get my EGR valve attached. Now, if anybody out there in video land chooses to do what I've done here, just be aware you're going to need some patience here, because there's the tube with a flange on it that goes into the manifold, and you've got to make sure that stays lined up. I had the tube out and cleaned it all, because that's the tube that all the gases go down, so it gets a bit yucky. And then there's a gasket in there, and you've got to get it in place, and then you've got to get the gasket down in between, down there in between, and then you've got to put, well, the studs in to tighten it all up. I guess technically you could use bolts either. You could probably use a couple of M8 bolts. All right, so I do actually have the EGR valve done now. It actually did work. So on the stud I had two nuts locked together. So that let me drive the stud in once I got it aligned and got the gaskets in properly. So snug the stud up, and then go in with a wrench and just pop the outer nut off here, and then just went in with a socket, tighten the inner one down as you normally would with a lock washer on it. So that's snugged up good to that now. So I'm just going through the process of tightening these down. So they're snugged. I'm going to go now and get the torque wrench and get all those torqued down before I start putting anything together over here. So 13 to 16 foot-pounds of torque here. There we go. All right, I think the manifold's back on. Hoping to goodness I have no leaks there, but honestly there's no way to try until you start it, and you can't start it till I put everything back together. So, right, we will start putting it back together. Fingers crossed. And just a reminder, there is a coolant hose here that you have to connect up to the manifold collector here. You may be easier to do that before everything gets bolted down. I didn't, so I've gotten it up. Bit of a fight, but I've gotten it up and clamped on. But it may be easier to wiggle it in place as you put the manifold down. So I think I now have things pretty much buttoned up on this side. Spark plug leads are in. I've fed the lines through for the cylinder head temp sensor, the distributor, the line for the fuel pressure regulator there, cold start, solenoid, EGR all plugged in. It was really just a matter of the ground here. There's a tiny little vacuum line there. Hooked up the vacuum line to the EGR. And I got that coolant hose down under there, the tricky one to get at. PCV hose in place. So I think I've got everything hooked up on this side. Mostly it was a case of taking things apart, putting them back together, routing things differently to try and, as best you can with this level of stuff to try and tidy it up. So, I mean, we won't know quite how good it's going to look till it's all done. It's not like a tucked engine bay by any stretch. There's way too much stuff here, but hopefully at least looks tidy when the dust all finally settles. All right, working on driver's side here. You can see it's a work in progress still. I'm just going through hooking things up. I've got pretty much everything at the front all done now. We've got the hard vacuum lines that run through here that I took off and got all refinished. That's all back in place. These lines are hooked up here. Spark plug leads are routed through. Distributor caps on, new rotor, new vacuum lines everywhere. I took off more stuff than you would have to if you were just getting to the valve cover gaskets. So, I took off more stuff to clean and whatnot. But I thought I'd go through where I am right now, what's currently hooked up, is just a reminder of what you have to hook up. There's two ground cables that go back here. You need to hook up. There's a vacuum line here. There's a brake booster back line here. There are two vacuum lines under the throttle body, one here and one here. There are two coolant lines here and here. The way they go down here, I think they're coolant lines for cooling the turbo, but not 100% sure. There is another line that goes back under here, also under the brake booster. And then there's a hose here that goes to the charge pipe. And this is the second hose from the charge pipe that goes here to the idle control valve. You've got two plug-ins for the idle control, one here and one here you have to get back on. You've got the throttle cables back in place here. I just got to hook them up onto the throttle body here. And then you've got the vac lines that got to go here that have all been replaced. I haven't routed them all yet because I'm going to get the charge pipe in first and then try and route them around that and tidy them up. That's why these aren't plugged in yet and that's not tethered down yet, so I can still move this around if I need to. I'm just trying to get the nicest routing I can while I've got it apart here, but got more pipes to put in down here. I've just left this cover on the valve covers because they're painted and I really don't want them to get all scratched and chipped before I've even finished assembling stuff. So that's where we currently are. So I'm going to carry on putting the rest together, but that's what you've got to at the very least hook up here so far. Just as a reminder to everybody of what you got to do. I guess I got the other spark plugs here. Still got the coil to hook up. Still got the lead to the distributor here to hook up. Okay, so everything is hooked up. It is now running. Well, not this particular moment, but it has started. It runs fine. I will say when I first went to start it, it would start and then stall immediately, which sounded like a vacuum leak somewhere. And I did find that I had missed a hose. I'll show you the hose. I'll go back and show you. But it just goes to show you have to be really careful and double check, triple check everything. I thought I had gone through everything a couple of times and I still missed something. But it is done. Okay, so while I've got it together enough that it's running, there still are a few things I need to button up under here, but I'll just show you the mistake that I made. This is an auxiliary air control valve, at least according to the information I found online. I was calling it an idle control valve, I think. Anyway, it has a hose here that goes down and goes into the back of this charge pipe. I had originally put it on the charge pipe, and then I found I was struggling to get it hooked up here, so I disconnected it here, hooked this up, bolted all this in place, and then I forgot to hook this hose back up to here. I hooked that hose back up. It is running fine now. It starts and idles. So I went through everything, but it's so crowded down here that I honestly, if I hadn't taken this off, I wouldn't have realized that was disconnected. You can't see it. So anyway, done. It is all back together now. I mean, in terms of taking this apart, you know, you've got the 5 bolts across here. You've got 2 bolts here on the turbo pipes to disconnect. You've got 2 bolts to disconnect throttle cables, and you've got whatever you're doing to the EGR there. And then the rest of it is just disconnecting things and labeling them and putting it back together. So it's certainly not difficult. It's tedious. And then putting it back together, of course, I made it a little more complicated because I was trying to tidy things up, and I, done other things with the cabling and whatnot to clean everything up. But in terms of a job, it's not that bad to do. It's just tedious trying to connect and disconnect all the hoses and plumbing that's associated with this era of car. So we're basically wrapped up under there with the engine compartment. A couple of last little things to button up, but pretty much done. If you're tackling that job, if you're taking off valve covers, if you're taking off the intake collector, hopefully the video gives you a bit of an idea what you may be involved in, or at least how I tackled it. If you're wondering what it looks like under there when it's all done, I'm going to do a walkthrough on the engine bay restoration in, it's going to be called, well, probably episode 20, because that's the next one. So I'll do that first, and then I'll show you what it looks like all done there. We'll do that before we start to move on to the interior work. If you enjoy the video, if you enjoy any of the series, a like, subscribe, much appreciated. And, as always, you guys all stay safe out there. Drive carefully, and I hope to see you back here in the garage.